What is up everyone, I'm Gushi, and in this video we're going to be going over my hyper aggressive DPS Ronin build, which I'm calling the Ghost Striker. With this build, I actually beat my last week's time for Rivals when I was using my Hunter, and got my highest kill count with 57 kills in one Rivals match. So it's safe to say that this build is a fragging monster. Also, I really think that with this build, the Ronin is actually better than the Samurai, at least for Rivals. So in this video, we're going to be going over the gear that I'm using, along with all the perks and techniques, and the general playstyle, so you know when and where to use your abilities. So if you guys are interested, stay tuned. So the reason that it's called the Ghost Striker is because we are using the Stone Striker, as well as boosting our ghost weapon damage as high as possible. So let's go over the gear that I'm using. In the Katana slot, of course, I'm using the Stone Striker, and we're mostly using this to gain Heavenly Strike, and do big bursts of damage in exchange for Resolve. For the Ronin, we don't really have a really good offensive ult. The new ult is pretty cool, the weakening effect is actually pretty good, and there's actually some impact damage, but the fact that it throws enemies back is a major downside. In most cases, you actually want to group enemies together so they're easier to hit with your AoE attacks. Knocking enemies backwards spreads them out, making it a lot easier for them to get around you, making you lose track of them. The other alternative is the Fire ult. This is pretty nice, but because there's no initial impact damage, all you get is a burn effect with a really long animation cast time. This is something we already get with our new ability, and most importantly, it doesn't do big bursts of damage, something that we really need with the Ronin. So using that Resolve individually for Heavenly Strike is a lot more useful. Think of it as a Samurai's Hachiman's Fury, but instead using each strike individually. Yes, it is a bit slower than Hachiman's Fury, but there are benefits where it's a lot easier to target specific enemies, and you don't go wasting extra strikes when you don't need it. For the stats, we'll be taking melee damage and Oni damage. Melee damage will boost that Heavenly Strike, and the Oni damage really helps in taking down those big guys, as most of the times the Oni are the last enemy standing. The Ronin does have a lot of fire focused abilities, so we'll be going all out on fire damage, taking Wave the Flame and Burning Blade. Wave the Flame is actually super important because when you activate Wave the Flame, all of your attacks go through the enemy's guard. This is a common theme and the main playstyle of this Ronin, making the enemy's guard pretty much irrelevant. Burning Blade isn't as needed, mostly because the chance to apply burning is random, but really is nice to have because, if you guys didn't know, status effects do stack. So this means if you have multiple sources that burn an enemy, that burn damage will stack upon each other, making the enemy burn twice as fast. In this first example, I'm using only one Black Powder Bomb, and just notice how slow this purple Oni Lord's health goes down. Next, we're going to try to quadruple this by using the Explosive Barrel, 2 Black Powder Bombs, and the Ronin's class ability, Flaming Roar. The duration that the enemies burn is not that long, but comparing the difference on how fast the health goes down, it is noticeable that fire damage does stack. Alright, next moving on to the Bomb Pack. For the stats, we have Blast Radius, just so we can hit as many enemies as possible. The higher the blast radius, the more damage it does to enemies that are further away. We'll also take status effect damage, so our burning effect does more damage. And the most important part is the Black Powder Bombs. Black Powder Bombs are considered as ghost weapons, so this will be your highest DPS weapon in your arsenal. You mostly want to be using this against high health enemies or at the start of spawns while enemies are grouped up, so you can hit as many enemies as possible. Other than your Black Powder Bombs, you also have Concussion Grenades, which are also another really important tool in your toolkit. Just like the Stone Striker having the ability to Heavenly Strike through an enemy's guard, if you're up against an enemy that always blocks your attack, the Concussion Bombs are a great tool to stun an enemy for a couple seconds and get free hits in. So for enemies like these Spearmen, the guys with the shield, this is perfect for getting through their guard. Another really useful way to use this is just to stun enemies. The Oni Lord and the Oni Archers are really mobile, either teleporting around, or in the Oni Lord's case, doing a lot of unblockable attacks. Throwing a bomb pack to stun them gives you a couple seconds to get free hits in, then going back to throwing another bomb will keep them stunned, pretty much stun locking them as long as you have enough ammo in your inventory. Next, the charm that I use is the Stealth Charm. Again, the purpose of the build is to have as much ghost weapon damage as possible, So for our first stat, we want Ghost Weapon damage, and then our second slot, we want status effect damage. Along with our perk Fire Master, this will boost our fire tick damage just a little bit further. For our second perk, which is really important to this build, we're running Combat Regeneration. Combat Regeneration is going to be our only healing source, so this is really important. Because this is specifically made for rivals, there are a lot of healing gems and ammo stations that you can also use to fill up your health if you really need it. Again, this is a hyper aggressive build, so this is pretty much all the healing that we need. Moving on to our Ghost Weapon 1, and probably the most important weapon in the Ronin's arsenal is Spirit Kunai. Again, for our stat, we'll take Ghost Weapon damage, with the second stat being cooldown reduction on kill. This is actually a really important stat to have to get your cooldown cycle working. When you're using your Spirit Kunai, you should always be getting at least 2 kills. With 2 kills, that gives us 20 seconds off all of our cooldowns, plus another 8 seconds from this stat. This gives us a total of 28 seconds taken off for your Spirit Kunai, essentially making the Spirit Kunai have a 2-second cooldown. It is ideal to get as many kills as possible, but as long as you're getting 2, you can basically continually use your Spirit Kunai. And because of this weapon, and how much of a boost in Ghost Weapon damage you can get with the Ronin, this is why I think that the Ronin is better for rivals than the Samurai. With the Spirit Kunai, you can chain kills against lower tiered enemies, making the Ronin's mid-fight game a lot stronger and faster. For our perk, Supermassive is really important, so you can maximize your damage and confirm those kills. Hidden Blades is also pretty good to hit more enemies and possibly lower your cooldowns even more. There's 2 other scenarios that I use the Spirit Kunai. One is to stun enemies. Because we have Supermassive, our Kunai can now stun larger enemies like the Oni to either stop their attack or to just stun them if you're out of concussion bombs. Also, since we're using Hidden Blades, we can also burst down higher health enemies by a method known as barrel stuffing. Usually when you throw your Spirit Kunai, it fans out kind of like a shotgun. However, if you get as close as you can to an enemy, you can actually get more of these kunai to hit the same enemy, doing a lot more damage than if you only hit one. With this, I could usually take around half of the Oni Brute's health if I really needed to. And finally, moving on to the Ghost Weapon 2, there's actually 2 options that I switch between. The first and my favorite is the Caltrops. Caltrops will give you that increase to Ghost Weapon damage as well as status effect duration, so this is definitely the more offensive choice. We'll also be taking it fired up and deep bags, so it can cover a larger area and set enemies on fire, making use of all these fire buffs that we have. And so the scenarios that you really want to use this are on smaller maps where you pretty much know the enemy spawns, or they always come from a general direction. I also like throwing this right below an Oni's feet, so no matter where they go, they usually hit around 2 to 3 Caltrops. And with all this Ghost Weapon damage, you can actually take a decent chunk out of a purple Oni's health. Now in other cases where maps are a little bit larger, or you'll be moving from area to area, I actually recommend using the Smoke Bomb instead. Instead of more offensive stats, we're taking full cooldown, so cooldown reduction and cooldown reduction on kill, along with munitions to have more ammo pickups. The smoke is super important in keeping the enemies in place so they don't move to different parts of the map, especially when you're trying to deal with archers that teleport to high ground or places that are really far away, keeping them in place and open to attack so you can take them out as fast as possible and get all that Magatama that they drop. So for each map, I recommend everyone trying both options, as one option might work better than the other for you, especially during the last stand waves in Rivals. With the Caltrops, you really have to know where the enemy is spawning from, and you have to be killing the enemies as fast as possible so you don't miss them, making you lose time by going all the way back to the point just to kill them. Smoke bombs do give you that time and leeway to trap enemies in place, and more importantly group them up so that your bomb packs and your Spirit Kunai hit more enemies. Keep in mind that Caltrops does slow down enemies, and a successful Heavenly Strike will also stun nearby enemies for a very short time. So if you're really trying to control the spawns and make sure no one passes, keep in mind these are 2 other tools that can buy you some time and provide you some extra crowd control. Another reason why you might want to be using smokes instead of Caltrops is for the munitions. With this build, you are very reliant on ammo. Because of this, you really do need to know where the ammo refill stations are and have a consistent pathing so you don't have to go out of the way just to refill your ammo. If you do find this a problem, if you find that this is happening a lot, smoke bombs with munitions might be your answer, and with all the cooldown reduction, you should be having this up fairly frequently. Next, let's move on to the techniques that I'm using. For our class ability, we're using the new one called Flaming Roar. As said before, this is exactly like the Fire ult ability, but it's on a cooldown rather than using Resolve. In perk slot 1, we'll be using Enhanced Ghost Weapons. This 50% increase to ghost weapon damage is really important, as this is really important to confirm kills with your Spirit Kunai and reset its cooldown so you can continually chain attacks. For perk 2, we're using Quick Regen. This will increase our healing received by 50%. Since combat regeneration is the only healing that we're getting, we definitely want any kind of boost to our healing, so this really helps us keep us alive. Finally, for perk slot 3, we're using Legendary, again so we could use Stone Striker and Spirit Kunai. Finally, let's go over the playstyle and the basic game loop to help you guys understand this build a little bit better. So what I really like to do is start off with some kind of fire attack. I use Flaming Roar if there's lower tiered enemies. I throw down Caltrops if there's a higher health enemy that doesn't move around a lot. If there's an enemy that moves around a lot like the Oni Lords, I'll throw a Black Powder Bomb to stun them and get that initial burn tick damage. Once enemies are low enough, preferably 2 or more, I'll throw out my Spirit Kunai to confirm the kill and reduce the cooldowns of all my other weapons. Ideally, you want to be using your other weapons before the Spirit Kunai so you can reduce their cooldown after you use them. For Purple Oni, this isn't enough to take down their health enough for your Spirit Kunai to finish off, so I either followed up with a Concussion Bomb to stun lock them and then attack, or if I have enough Resolve, I'll do normal attacks and then a Heavenly Strike. And this is really dependent on how much ammo I have or how much Resolve I have. So this is probably the hardest part, just balancing your Resolve and your ammo so you never run out of both at the same time. If anything, I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please drop a like and let me know what you think about this build in the comment section down below. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope to catch you next one, and GG.